Thanks for the introduction. So I think we're going to get into the gist of it. So I was looking at the latest statistics. Obviously, everybody, since yesterday we were talking about pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's almost like the old chapter and the new chapter. Pre-COVID, globally speaking, the tourism sector was around 1.5 billion people travel globally. Post-COVID now, we're talking about 75% recovery in terms of volume. Now, when we zoom into East Africa, I know because most of you are from Kenya, but East Africa is beyond just Kenya, right? So if you can give me, what is the number of tourists that we get per year? Because it's a bit confusing for me. I hear different set of numbers, 2 million, 1 million. What is the official statistics of annual tourists coming to Kenya or to East Africa? So I'm going to start with Mehdi, maybe?
Well, that's an interesting point. It's not only after COVID. It used to be the same issue before COVID. One of the issues we have, comparing to some other countries like Mauritius, where you have very clear statistics, Kenya has never had really proper statistics. You had different numbers thrown away. You hear about 2 million. The 2 million may be including the business travelers, the people coming back into Kenya, and so on, so on. But I heard once from the former CS, the minister, the real number of tourists in 2019, pure tourists, was rather around 500,000 people only.
And you're talking 500,000 in Kenya?
In Kenya.
Right?
I have no statistics about the surrounding countries, I'm afraid.
Okay, so which is interesting in a way, because I guess that number needs to be out there. Right now, it's very confusing, even for investors, to get the gist of numbers, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's the issue.
So now, when we talk about the lodge sector, obviously we're talking about East Africa. So in your mind, when we talk about East Africa, which countries are we talking about, and which sort of parts of these countries are we really talking about? Maybe I'm going to get the question to Kieran, maybe.
Thanks, Kevin. East Africa is primarily 4 destinations. Kenya, Tanzania, they're the main attractors. And then you have Uganda and Rwanda. Kenya, Tanzania, noted for the big 5 experience primarily. You've got the Serengeti Mara ecosystem, which is a big pull for this part of the world. But over time, countries like Rwanda have started to really develop their tourism product and their attractiveness, especially from a luxury segment point of view, with their gorilla and primate offering. And recently, the introduction of Akagera National Park also as a big 5. The intention there being to keep Rwanda as a destination in its own right and an add-on from the Mara or the Serengeti. Uganda is looking to re-establish itself from a luxury tourism perspective, but still does well with the mid-scale, mid-lux markets. But there is very much from, I think, the president down through the Uganda Wildlife Agency, a determination to put Uganda on the map in a much more prolific way.
Thank you. Rube, I think you wanted to add something as well, or?
No, we have a huge potential, I would say, for East Africa in terms of that we can, if we could package those deals, like Rwanda and gorilla trekking versus, beach from Diani, or, if we could look towards potential packages like that to help East Africa, that would be ideal for me. That's what I would say.
So when we talk to the tour operators internationally, you've mentioned, Kieran, Tanzania and Kenya sort of come up first, right? So these are the main markets, and then the sub-markets would be Rwanda. But East Africa is not just those 3, right? So why we never talk about the other markets in the region? And I don't know, maybe I'm going to ask Mohammed, maybe if you've got a view, Lena, rather, if you've got a view about that.
So I hear back in the 70s that whenever Kenya got up onto the stage, every other African country at a travel show, every other African country would shake in their boots. So maybe it's from history. Shaking their boots because we have such a diversity of offering, and also I think regionally, what do we actually do to support each other? in tourism.
Mehdi, you want to add?
I think also, I mean, if you want to enlarge to, let's say, not the secondary, but tertiary one would be Ethiopia, because of all the cultural offerings. And wait, when Congo one day will fix the issues, and some people would consider if Virunga Park is one of the most incredible parks, and that's still East Africa to me. Sadly, the security, even they have the gorillas, they have everything, but security is the issue for now.
Thanks, Mehdi. I mean, Jago, from Marriott perspective, which is interesting, the last couple of years we keep hearing Marriott putting signages or signing. So what has been attracting you in this market, East African market, and then also specifically Kenya, obviously because you're doing quite a lot in Kenya itself?
Look, for us, East Africa as a market obviously consists of the likes of Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, even Ethiopia, and potentially some of the countries in the Indian Ocean. And what really attracts us towards this region per se is the vast variety of offerings that we can offer to our loyalty members and also to other customers across all our brands. The beauty about East Africa is you've got a mix of city hotels, some beautiful resorts with some great beaches, and also the overall lodge and camp experience. And that's what we're trying to do, is to potentially look to build a circuit around all these different places. We've just started off with the JW Marriott Masai Mara. We're learning from it, and we're building on that success. And we're trying to leverage all our premium and luxury brands within this segment.
But when you look at obviously, I mean, you've got a global visibility, right, of the tourism sector globally. But when you look at East Africa currently, I mean, give us a sense of the potential. What are we achieving currently? Is it 50%, 20%? What are we doing? 99% of the potential?
At the moment, from our perspective, I mean, we haven't even touched into majority of the potential yet. There's still a lot more potential left to explore. Lots of different sectors, segments, countries, and areas that we can potentially get into as well. So to answer your question, yes, there's a tremendous amount of potential in the region, and we're yet to see it.
And when we look, let's say we talk about Kenya, for example, the USPs for Kenya in the tourism sector, because obviously you're competing with global jurisdiction, right? I mean, people can travel anywhere. And maybe Lena, what are the USPs of Kenya?
Well, I think hospitality is in our DNA, actually, and people's at the forefront of that. So everyone who visits is always blown away by how friendly and how proud Kenyans are. I think that's one part of it. I think post-COVID, COVID actually did us well, especially in the lodging market. Future trends are showing that travelers really want a transformative experience. And I think there was a Skift survey that said respondents were really looking at how can we get a new perspective when we travel. And I think Kenya, Africa, we're perfectly placed to actually give those very intentional, transformational experiences. We do a good job of actually bringing in the community. And we've got very diverse offerings. You know, you've got beach, mountains, different kinds of safari parks. We've got abundant diversity and abundant wildlife. And there's still a lot more potential, but it's one of the first places that people want to come when they say safari.
I was going to say, just to add to what Mehdi was saying, and to Lena, I think the big problem we have in East Africa is seasonality. We have this bell curve problem that we haven't managed to overcome, where there's massive demand and pressure on inventory between June and October, and then everyone is struggling, to fill their properties in every other month, bar peak season, December, and maybe a bit of Easter. So, from an East African perspective, we've got a big job to do with marketing the destination, based on value off season, and looking at counter-cyclical opportunities, new markets. We're so dependent on traditional source markets, US, UK, Europe primarily, as the mainstay of our business. But we need to look elsewhere. We need to find markets where people travel in other times of the year to start filling our beds and making more of a success story for East Africa.
Which is interesting, you talk about seasonality. If you look at beach resort jurisdictions, they've also had this seasonality, like, you know, sort of, depending where you are, beach resorts, you know, December, Jan, or June, July, etc. But then the last 5 or 6, 7 years, we've seen they've managed to flatten the ups and downs, right? Mehdi, I mean, you've had experience of beach resort, you've got quite a lot of experience on the African continent. So this seasonality of 4 months, how do we get out of that sort of lock?
I think first of all is we need to count on the authorities also when it comes to our tourism board offices and so on. Most of them in East Africa, sadly, are not doing the role that they should be doing. You're saying about seasonality. I mean, if we're speaking about seasonality of the camps, on one end, people come to Masai Mara. They're having Masai Mara, the migration, which is a lovely thing to see. But it's the most crowded time of the year. To anyone who calls me and asks me when to go to Kenya, I say any time except from June to October. That's my recommendation. The weather is better. You get to see more animals, more privately, and so on. To what Kieran said, just one other thing. Who knows much about our beach resorts? Not much. There's nothing being done, and it's always the same discussion, eternal discussion. As operator, we get approached by owners, and they say, oh, I have a plot or I have a hotel. I would like to put up a hotel. So we say, I'm very interested to do a resort together. But then again, the issue is always the same. What comes first? Infrastructure. Flights are good, but promotion is not there. You're going to put a hotel today. The local market will work very well, which is a great thing, by the way, for the coast. But internationally, people would come here, they would do our safaris, and then fly to Tanzania. That's what they do for the beach.
Rup, your experience?
You know, I actually think we, like you said, we have to look at East Africa as a whole. So for sure, there is a seasonal issue. And I think the tourism board do need to address that, especially helping us market it all round. But I also feel like that, I stressed it before, that maybe we need to look at other package deals. Look towards Rwanda, look towards gorilla trekking, and then combine it maybe with Nairobi or Mombasa, you know, a beach deal there. So opening up markets instead of like having regional flights around East Africa, make it more, you know, easy accessible, like cheaper flights to come to East Africa, you know, rather than, I mean, flights towards Uganda are quite expensive, you know. If it was a cheap flight, just like how you go to Europe and, you know, you can easily get a flight there for like, you know, you can get a deal for like 40, 50 pounds to go somewhere. You know, if only we could do that here for East Africa, I think that would be a game changer for all of us. And it would help our entire market.
But within Kenya itself, you think Kenya doesn't have sufficient attributes to come up with a 2 weeks package for somebody to come in and do 3 days at the coast, 4 days at the coast, 2 days or 5 days?
I think it definitely does. I think we have a huge potential for that. I think we just don't have the infrastructure for that. We don't have enough flights in tourist destinations such as Voi, where Savo, you know, East National Park is, which is, you know, not many people know how big this park is. It's the size of Wales. You know, it's just not marketed. Mara is marketed. So this is a problem about Kenya, I would say, is we don't have a lot of infrastructure in terms of flights. And if we did, I think, you know, there would be great selling points as to go to places. Yeah.
If I could just add one thing, I think we all sing the same song about changing the perceptions of seasonality and all the rest of it, whether we're operators or owners. But how much can we do as individuals? And really, the tourism authorities need to work with us, the tourism boards, to just change the perception and for different markets to realize that we are a 12-month-year destination.
But sometimes, you know, I've seen in other jurisdictions where the private sector becomes more proactive, i.e. the association actually does the master plan or the big vision, and then hand it over to the public sector authority. So the question to you is, as the private sector, how much have you done that discussion within the private sector to come up with a master plan?
I think I've seen Kieran on a few boards where we have actually got together. We've tried to change the perception, change the safari story, but ultimately, if you're not given the governance to change anything, then what's the point?
There was a big project undertaken by the previous government under the CS to identify ways of reimagining tourism for Kenya in particular. A lot of work went into that endeavor. McKinsey were involved, heavily involved, in orchestrating it, researching, putting together a master plan. So it does exist. But obviously with transition from one government to another, it takes time to pick up on things which were done before, and people want to put their own mark on it. So, we're lucky that the rebound from COVID has been much more prolific than we ever imagined, but especially for this part of the world. But I think it will be some time before we see some renewed energy, back into tourism marketing across the region.
Thank you. Thanks. Let's talk a bit about the source markets. Where are the visitors coming from, right? And maybe I'm thinking of Lena. Maybe if you can give us a perspective of. Very often when I ask the question, the first answer I get is Americans. But I'm sure there must be more than Americans coming to Kenya, right?
There is, and I think COVID actually highlighted Kenya as a destination when a lot of other destinations were closed. So markets like the Middle East suddenly woke up, and I always wondered, it's 4.5 hours from Dubai. What are these people doing? And they couldn't go to Thailand, and they couldn't go to France. So we saw a pickup from there. Asia, not so much. I think it was quite difficult for them in the last couple of years. But again, it's what are we doing in those destinations to market Kenya? How much can we do as single owners?
But when you talk about Asia, which country or countries are you?
South Asia, look, we have, maybe Kieran can answer this one, because you've got a much larger portfolio than we do, and you probably see a lot more different source markets.
Okay, I mean, obviously the big outbound market is country. Outside that, Philippines, Hong Kong, similar to China, Hong Kong, in the sense of the COVID restrictions, Singapore, Thailand. So that whole Southeast Asia subcontinent is becoming the sort of the next interesting market to look at from an East African perspective, and with air connectivity growing by the day, especially with Middle Eastern airlines. I think that they will be markets of the future, that we should put a lot of effort into marketing our destination as a region.
And these Southeast Asian markets that you're talking about, are these predominantly for the safaris, or can you see a combo of beach?
Less beach, more safari.
Less beach, more safaris. Okay. And the European market?
The European market is a combination of both. So traditionally, the European market has been very keen on coming on safari and then coupling that with a beach extension. The rise of the charter market in the 80s and 90s drove the Kenya coast as a destination in its own right, with safari as an add-on in reverse. So it was 2 or 3 days of flights to Vimara or up to Amboseli or to Finch Hattons or wherever it may be. But the opportunity to package beach and safari very much depends on the source market that you're trying to appeal to.
And when we talk about the European market, obviously from West Europe to Central and East, what are you seeing post-COVID? Which country or countries are sort of coming up? as
All of
you-
them.
All of them.
In fact, in Savo, it's mostly Eastern Europeans. We've been getting a lot of Polish, which was very different from before COVID. It would be a lot of Germans, and then even British. But now it's in French. But now it's changed. It's a lot of Eastern Europeans, so mostly Polish.
And what about the Nordic countries? Because they
Yes, we've actually just been to a trade show in the in Scandinavia and Finland, and we're seeing a lot of interest from there, actually.
And for them to fly to Nairobi, how do they fly?
And I think that's one of the problems we had. And speaking of the past government, we had a politic where the government was trying to push as much as they could KQ, Kenya Airways, and to the detriment of reducing the flights of Emirates. And we've been struggling, pushing. Now what we see is that Emirates got a second flight, at least, finally. And there's, speaking of third flight, and a lot of these people fly via Dubai, or used to come historically through London. Now it comes easier through Dubai. And people would make, especially Eastern Europeans, sorry, because they would stop in Dubai, shop in Dubai. And there's no issue of flights, because today you cannot fly to London anymore from Russia, for example.
Which I was going, good transition, by the way, thank you. I was going to ask, you've spoken about all these markets. What about the Russian market? If I look at some jurisdiction like Maldives, Russian is like #1 market, which wasn't the case pre-COVID or pre-24th February 2022.
Take Zanzibar in 2021. It was mobbed by Russians. The whole island was virtually taken over by Russia.
But do you see that as a potential in terms of, because they need to travel, right?
Very much so.
But then are you doing the marketing? Is that sort of happening, or is it sort of a dream that's...
We're just in the throes of trying to appoint the right GSA or rep for that market. So we're very actively looking at developing Russia as an outbound.
And then the Middle East market, the Saudis, for example, the Omanis, etc. Are you seeing that as well as a potential source market?
Yeah, it is a huge source market, but I think where the data gets a bit skewed is a lot of them are expats. So are you actually getting, true Middle Easterns? And so I think it's, how are we marketing in which market to which culture there?
You get some families based on the brands, and I think that's where the brands role, like large international brands, attract such guests. You get also families, royal families and so on that will come, but they go a lot on private safaris, really. They would do tailor-made one, and then just stay, for example, in a Fairmont and here and there. But as Lena said, a lot of the visitors from Dubai are expats. But also what happened is for the last year, most of the flights were fully booked. So you were losing a market, definitely.
And the last source market, intra-Africa market, what are you seeing there? Which countries are you seeing coming to Kenya?
We've seen a big growth from Egypt. The connectivity is not too bad. Weird timings. Turkey is actually also a very big market for Kenya. We get a lot of Turkish clients in Mahali, Missouri, but if any, I would say, Egypt.
Eastern African to Eastern African, there's not that many finally. We still, you have a very solid local market in Kenya. Kenyans traveling in Kenya, and that got boosted really after COVID. But East Africa, not really, at least not that I see.
And a bit of West Africa as well. Nigerians, especially in Nairobi. Yeah.
But not in the safari.
Not in the safari, right?
Yeah, not as tourists, yeah.
Okay, great.
But I think as demographics change over the next 5-10 years, we'll see a lot more interest in safari, beach experiences from within the continent.
Great transition again, thank you. We didn't rehearse that, by the way, but I was going to ask you, are you, in other jurisdictions, again, we're seeing multiple segmentation in terms of, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, etc. But your market here, is it predominantly sort of, which generation is it in terms of tourist source? Are you seeing differences?
Kieran, which generation are you?
We're still very much dependent on baby boomer Gen X, I would say. That's the mainstay of our safari business. But certainly, when you've got Gen N, Gen novel traveler, or anywhere traveler, people that are looking for new experiences. And so, experiential travel is going to take on a whole new meaning going forward, and we have to adapt our product and our marketing to attract the millennials and the Gen Zers who are going to be those buyers of that experiential type product.
And I think just adding to the experiential, they actually want transformational. They want to see that they can connect with your brand values. Where's their money going? Is it going down to the community? They need to feel that it's a meaningful transaction. And I think that's a big part of that marketing.
Absolutely. And Jago, you've got a global perspective. We're talking about different generations, etc. So I've seen lately hoteliers are adapting their hotels and their brands according to, which year you were born and all that. Do you see that as well happening in this market? You've come with 2 brands, right?
Yeah, look, it has happened globally, and rightly so, and that's why we've got a wide variety of brands. We've got around 31 brands right now. Each of them have their own brand standards, and each of them try to cater to, different types of audiences as well. But in this market specifically, I think it's too early to say. Once we see a lot more development happening and different levels of positioning going into different markets, then there is going to be a time whereby you're going to see more and more travelers coming. And again, to one of the points earlier, while yes, there are challenges to promote fairly newer destinations per se within the market, the international brands do tend to induce significant amount of demand in order to ensure that those destinations are known. So that would potentially help in the future as well.
Thank you. Another good transition. So the value of international brands in the lodge sector, what are your thoughts from a local perspective? I'm looking at Lena.
So I think I have the unique perspective of owning and operating a lodge under our own brand. And then we own a lodge with Branson, and that's operated by Virgin Limited Edition. Look, there's definitely huge value to be had from the distribution channels, the brand loyalty, the brand awareness. But ultimately, I think, a successful partnership, it really is about mutual embedded respect. The operators respecting what the local partners bring to the table, and the local partners understanding and respecting what the international operator brings, and to have a shared vision, from the outset.
Roop, you operate your own brand?
No, I do believe in international brands. I think there's a lot of value for it because I think clients, look at that towards payments, towards accommodation, even towards getting refunds. So I think it is very important, and it's something that we would look towards potentially in the future. Yeah.
Kieran, you wanted to add?
I have to be very careful what I say, given the company I'm in. So, look, I think there's a certain inevitability about international brands moving into the adventure space. You take a Marriott with 130 million plus Bonvoy members, they have to come up with more and more differentiated experiences to serve the needs of that membership. They've got a captive audience. The same with Accor. It's obvious that's what they're going to do. And I think they'll do it very well. I think they'll have to learn the destination. It won't be an easy learning curve, but they will get there. And they will play a role, a needed role.
Mehdi, you have to...
Let me be the dissonant voice in here, surprisingly. I think, look, great value, no discussion, all what you all said, but I would say a but. There's a very, very important but. You can't just approach the lodge sector in Africa the way you approach your hotels in London or in Nairobi or anywhere else. Basically, your local knowledge is everything. And so it works only if you have a strong and serious partner locally. And, we keep saying something, we always do word Africa, Africa. you barely sit and speak about Europe. You speak about France, you speak about Germany, markets. You know, Africa is one continent, but from one country to another, it's a different culture, language, whole approach, way of doing business, and so on. So also this, the local knowledge and the local presence of the brands, if they are to operate in such business, they have to have a representation close to the ground. That's very important.
So in the lodge sector, can you see basically when international brands come in as a franchisor with the locals running the operations? Because as you've mentioned, you've said they know the market, the terrain, right?
I mean, look, you have to be clear when you go for an international brand of what you're looking for. If you're looking for specific support, if you're looking for the distribution and the card holders, then a franchise works. Now it depends which brand also. I would not place a Sofitel on a lodge because Sofitel is not meant to be a lodge. That's my point. If you take Fairmont, for example, was not meant, but with the 20 years plus being on Masai Mara, it acquired knowledge, reputation in the market, and so on. And you said it's a learning curve, and it takes time. And I think we have to be. That's why Accor acquired Mantis, if you remember. Mantis is a brand about lodges, but the same way does Mantis. Is Mantis meant to manage the 300 rooms in Nairobi? Of course, no. And that's also, we owe that to the owners also to give the right brand that can be adapted to the lodge, and vice versa.
The three brands that you're running, which are Sofitel, M Gallery, and
Emblems.
So none of these brands would suit the lodge.
Emblems, yes. Anything that is collection. I believe in collections for the lodges because that works very well. You see, one of the problems today, if you have a lodge, you are an owner, you want to build a lodge, and you want to go and look for management or franchise. If I go to you, Eliwana, they will tell me no because they don't manage somebody else's lodges so far. Saruni, whoever you go to the big players, they will tell you no. So there's a need for a lodges brand. Mantis does that role for us. But some people don't want Mantis, they want something else. So it's a long discussion. It's not a straight reply yes or no. It takes a lot of elements inside, yeah.
Jago.
And to your point, I mean, which is why what we've been trying to do over the last few years is to develop and adapt our brand standards for a certain amount of our brands towards the overall lodge segment and partner with local partners per se who have the experience while we provide the branding, the distribution, and so on and so forth with 180 million Bonvoy members worldwide. I completely agree at the fact that local expertise and experience and having a very good local partner is essential towards the process.
And I just want to applaud the operators here because over the last 15 years, there's been a real shift from international operators. And we've been approached as Finchattens many times by these brands. And we were like, okay, if you do a franchise. And they're like, no. And now it's like, do you want to do a franchise? Maybe?
Yeah, we can start talking now.
Okay.
Which is interesting. On the previous panel, I think they were talking about we're seeing more franchise model than full management contracts, so which is good news for the owners on the continent. Let's talk about distribution. For somebody who doesn't know anything about the market here, can you explain, maybe Kieran, explain the distribution? Who controls the pipe? The tour operators, the OTAs, I mean, digital, direct bookings. Give us a flavor of what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, it very much depends on the product. Let's deal with the easy one, beach, for instance. There's a lot of OTA influence in the distribution of beach inventory. It does very well from a Kenya, East Africa perspective generally. When it comes to more complex multi-destination itineraries, it's very much a DMC, B2B driven distribution. People don't want to come on a safari experience without talking to someone with specialist knowledge often. That means the Africa specialist agent or their own travel agent where they have comfort around whatever is being proposed. And that travel agent is going to work with the local DMC because of the logistics and the complexities of the destination. You know, people talk about disintermediating the market. They've been talking about it forever and a day. It hasn't happened for that very reason. who knows where we get to in 5, 10 years' time? Perhaps there will be a platform play by someone to look at becoming a digital DMC. But people still coming to Africa like to feel safe, secure. They want the right expertise and knowledge being given to them before they even pay their wares across the table. That comes from the current structure we have, no matter how cumbersome people may view it and how expensive it makes the value chain.
Yeah.
So just, leading off that, how expensive it makes the value chain. There was a report, I think, by UNEP about every $100 spent in a developing country, only $5 of that actually goes to the destination. So I agree with Kieran, and he's also one of our main DMCs, so I must be careful what I say. There is, we can't do without each other, but I do think we can change how we work with each other and how we disrupt the entire tourism supply value chain.
So what does it mean, practically speaking?
Practically speaking, it means, and back to those Gen Z and guys, where's the fairness and transparency in how we're pricing stuff? People want to know where the money's going. I don't know if this is a fact, but apparently Africa is one of the only continents where international agents actually still charge up to 30%. That's still there. That doesn't happen in the rest of the world. Some of these things need to shift, and we need to see a little bit more win-win on both sides. And the other thing I'd say is the operator, the host is the one that's creating the experience, and the operator can undermine that experience if they're not working together closely.
Maybe.
And one element to what you just said, sorry. More brands, and that's going to be one of the challenges of the international operators. We are working on 100% rate parity, and that's our big fight. Is there a demand to book directly? Yes, there is. As Kieran was saying, people's first concern was security. Now that information is easily accessible and you know the situation before traveling, that is tending to reduce. But then the problem you have, and that's where, to reply to your question, what are we doing to change that? Because we, as hotel operators, let's go back to the lodges. We still have international rates, local rate, East African rate. You cannot load 3 rates online, because if you are booked in the middle of the Masai Mara and somebody books you by mistake or genuinely trying to get a discount, comes to you, you cannot turn him away and say, sorry, you booked the wrong rate. So that's also the challenge why tour operators will still have a big share of the business, because we're not having a clear and transparent, to the point of Lina, clear and transparent rate distribution.
At least I've learned something. I should book on local rates, so they won't be able to.
We will not allow you.
Just remind me which hotel. But we're almost at the end. I don't know if you've got any questions from the audience. No? Yeah, there we go.
Hi, I'm David Ross. I have a property, and thank you for multiple mentions of Rwanda. I'm coming from Kigali, and we have a beautiful property with sunrise views over the lake, sunset views into the volcanoes, and 45 minutes from the gorillas. I have the land, and I've got some chutzpah. What else do I need to make this into a reality? We are very early in our journey. How would you give advice to, let's say, local partners that have an international mindset?
Okay, who wants to
I have one word for you, and that's resilience.
I'm sure you're going to get the international brands are going to jump after you.
I think we need to speak, but look, I think it's always beneficial, and I did hear this in one of the previous panels as well. It's always beneficial if you are seeking an international brand to come on board, first and foremost to determine whether you are looking to go under a franchise or a managed agreement, what the overall positioning is, and so on and so forth of the property, and then possibly start the conversation with the operator to understand exactly what the standards are going to be and what level of facilities you would need to build. Because the last thing you want to be doing is, start your construction, spend all that sort of money, and then next thing you know, the operator comes in with a heavy PIP, which is a property improvement plan. So yeah, it's always better to get, in my opinion, get the operator on board as soon as possible.
I've given the same replies. We've been discussing that out.
So you say they think alike, basically, the international brands, right? Any other questions or no? Free drinks on me? If it's no, okay. So I think we've reached the end, but maybe as a concluding remark, maybe we'll start from you.
I mean, maybe one topic we have not touched on is really the link to the community. Local community is key. From different aspects. First of all, your clients are expecting your sustainability. You still see some plastic bottles we should not see anywhere anymore. They're expecting your sustainability. They're expecting your respect of your surroundings. Yeah, and they're expecting from you that you pay your community well. And a very sad example last week in Kenya. Again, we lost 7 lions, the same in 2 days in Amboseli, because the herders have spared them. And then as long as tourism and all surrounding ecosystem doesn't benefit the community, then they will not see the interest of keeping dangerous animals, wildlife animals around them. So that's, I think, for any next topic that would be worth discussing.
Absolutely, community building. Jagal?
Yes, I agree. Community building, sustainability, but also what we're also looking to do is partner up with, look for the right local partners as well in order to grow with them. And as I mentioned earlier, provide our distribution and our brands, but also learn from them and get their expertise as well.
I think this lodging market has great potential. And not only that, I think it's actually pivotal to preserving Africa's biodiversity, wildlife, community culture, and ensuring that we preserve these spaces for the next generation.
I just wanted to say, I think we have a huge potential for East Africa. We have beautiful beaches, beautiful safaris. We just need, I think, just stressing again on regional flights. I think we need more regional flights, just easy visa access. Maybe an East African visa, that's a whole different topic. But, I think there's a lot of potential.
There's no doubt that tourism, from an East African perspective, is a vital driver of economic prosperity. It's responsible for significant foreign exchange inflows, which are vital to sustaining our external obligations, managing those appropriately, managing our currency locally. It's a big employer. It pays a lot of taxes. So it is a very important part of all of the East African economies. We have a number of threats in the form of significant population expansion over the coming years. 2058, for example, is a year where Kenya's population is expected to double from where it is today. We have a conservation mission that needs to take on different thinking and drive different arguments. And until we get aggregated thinking around some of these problems, we are going to struggle potentially to keep tourism at the forefront of economic activity.
So let's hope. I think a month ago the authorities announced, I think 5 million or 10 million, there was a number that was floated around in terms of international tourists in Kenya at least. So let's hope a year from now, even if you achieve 25% of that, that's good progress, right? Thank you very much. And drinks on me, by the way. A round of applause for our panelists.